Again, in our modern political context, think about that. It's jarring because we're so used to the rhetoric of democracy, but, just because we've lived with it for, a couple hundred years, does that mean modern democracy is the best? I like it in general, but it helps us to see the flaws when we're confronted with an alternative vision. So at the same time, modern political context is very toxic, at least in the United States, and I'm assuming other places. Is there a possibility that what Aristotle talks about is a way forward, right? Many people get online, start spouting off like me right now, and complain, but what actually is the fix or a fix for what ails us? Well, how about friendship?
Throughout life, we meet others who have insights and experiences quite unlike our own. The great ideas of classical works resonate differently with them. Often these treasures of mind and heart go unshared, reserved from others in the course of daily life. But what if we took the time to have those conversations, to sit down and recall those thoughts, those impressions upon us that moved us along our path? Why then, we would no longer be alone, and at least for one shimmering moment, someone else could see the world through our eyes. I give you the Confederal Reserve. Welcome to the Confederal Reserve presented by BetterPears. I am your host, Dr. Jason Fugikawa. The Confederal Reserve is a show that connects old friends, that is, Confederates, to discuss the ideas and classical works that have shaped their lives and worldviews. Before we get going, I will invite you to like this episode, subscribe to the BetterPears channel if you have not already, and click on the bell icon to receive notifications so that you remain the first to know of future interviews and podcast episodes. If you would like to support the work of BetterPears with your Federal Reserve notes and receive fractional gold in the mail each month, please follow the link in the description to our crowdfunding program, BetterPears Leaves. As a special bonus for the rest of 2024, every qualifying contribution earns an entry in our monthly Market Mug giveaway. Official rules are available at betterpears.com/giveaway. Now then, the structure of our show is our gimmick we want you to mimic. Our guest for the episode will offer a classical work of particular import to his or her life. What ensues is a conversation that uncovers insights and offers new perspectives on old works. It is a conversation between friends, which is the building block of the cultural renaissance that BetterPears seeks to foster. Our guest today is Matthew Caes. Matthew has studied biblical and systematic theology at the graduate level at both Franciscan University of Steubenville and Ave Maria University. His research interest focuses on the sacraments in the Gospel of John. It's my great pleasure to welcome our guest today on the Confederal Reserve, Matthew Caes. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Jason.
Well, we get right off to it on the show here. What is your classical work, and why is it so important?
Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. There's a lot of reasons why it's important. I'll just try and keep it to, it's a great entry-level text to a different worldview that anybody can pick up. You got a basic education, and you can understand it and agree or disagree. You can think through it. You don't need specialized training. You don't need a degree. You just need to be able to read English, because there's good translations out there.
Very good. Okay, so it's accessibility, applicability. I was teaching some ethics courses back in my professor jobs, and I was informed that by assigning the first book of the Nicomachean Ethics, I had basically done the rookie move. Because really where you need to start with the Nicomachean Ethics, particularly for college freshmen or college sophomores or juniors or wherever they are in their college career, is books 8 and 9, right, on friendship. Start with friendship. Book 1, Aristotle's kind of all over the place. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that, and his mind isn't really settled. Some say maybe that the way that the actual Greek text of Aristotle comes to us, sort of in the form of hastily scribbled notes from his students. It's like he's kind of how Plato is recounting what the dialogues that Socrates is having. That the works of Aristotle are probably scribes, students who are trying to quickly jot down all the distinctions that Aristotle is making, and he's all over the place in book 1 of the Ethics, but that books 8 and 9 on friendship are kind of those key things that resonate most with people who engage other people and therefore could have potential friends, right?
Yes.
So you said you wanted to talk about friendship and particularly those chapters. So what is it about those chapters that gnaws at you?
Well, for me, it was really the first time that I gave serious thought to friendship. I mean, we all have friends, of various types and different experiences, but, I was in grad school before I read the ethics for the first time. I went through my undergraduate at a liberal arts school and had intro to philosophy and a couple of other philosophy classes fulfilling requirements. Nobody gave me even selections from the ethics to read, which is extremely strange to me. And reflecting on friendship, Aristotle, he just lays out very clearly it should seem obvious once you read the text. Look, there's 3 different kinds of friendship, and then he traces out where these can go, right? He takes you all the way into political structures, right? So friendship relates to politics. Friendship relates to all sorts of different relationships. There's friendship between parents and children, husband and wife, and etc. And it got me thinking about friendships. In particular, there was one that it made me question whether I was a friend. I mean, we had mutual goodwill and all of that, but it gave me pause because he also says you have to share life. Well, how far does that have to go? Because growing up, I had a friend that was so close, or we both thought we were cousins, because just like cousins, we met once a year, just like at family reunions. Come to find out later that our parents were actually high school buddies, and they just met up every year. But we just kind of got together and assumed we were cousins for years. I think I was in junior high or high school before we figured it out. Oh, wait a minute, we're not related. But there, like I said, there was mutual goodwill. There was shared interests and all these other things. You're too young, can't say that you've got virtue yet, but it was a moment of pause, though. It's like shared life. Well, I only see him once a year, but every time I see him, we just pick up where we left off. It just started a train of questions for what is friendship, and do I really have friends? And that is a really important question that everybody needs to ask, is the reality of their friendship relationships, or the relationships that they call friends.
Right. No, and as you kind of brought in the whole kind of discourse that he introduces on the political life, right, in the movement from monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy or timocracy, sort of as an extension of oneself, right? So we see something, maybe sort of the patrimony of like the Republic, Plato's Republic, in the sense of the individual kind of writ large in the workings of a city. But ultimately, I think with Aristotle, there's this sort of a primacy, and I'm thinking sort of about how he kind of introduces the polis or the city in his politics, right? There's sort of like a necessity, right? A kind of a banding together that I need friends. In one sense, I need friends to overcome inadequacies in my own self, right? And so, we go to like a Hobbesian, right? Hobbes kind of framework. I need someone to keep the night watch, right? I need someone to make sure that the strongest man is not destroyed by the weakest woman by dropping a rock on his head when he's asleep, right? Like we need something to keep kind of order, kind of society, and the Socius Latin sense of allies, right? There to kind of mutual defense of a common good, and here just the common good of our own lives, beyond anything lofty like justice, right? But then there's sort of this question of that arises up elsewhere in the Nicomachean ethics, I think previously, right? This idea of sort of virtue, and sort of the highest personal virtue being magnanimity, which is in a way kind of not needing other people, right? That you have all these the full kind of complement of good habits, and therefore don't seem to need friends. And yet he has 2 chapters on friendship, because either maybe because not everybody is magnanimous. Not everybody is at sort of a pinnacle of virtue. There are people who need things, and that's how the world works. And not everybody has the full complement, right? And yet, I think there's another case to be said where even if one did have enough wealth and enough, food and protection and security and all the kind of everything going on, there would still be something sort of missing that friendship fills. And
he
would
says
you agree with that? And what do you think that is?
Absolutely. He kind of leads into the friendship discussion with, this hypothetical. Even if you have all the world's goods, etc., no one would choose to live without friends. And okay, so what is it that friends provide? And that's maybe a bad way of putting it, because remember, the friendship of utility, usefulness, is not true friendship, right? It is a derivation of, or kind of a image of
quality.
Yeah. So, and then when you get into it, you realize, where his text points out that no, you need this community to stimulate virtue, right? Kind of like the cynical part of me says, well, no, duh. I mean, there's certain virtues you can't practice without somebody else there. So, but no, he's saying that, I guess the modern phrase, iron sharpens iron. That's probably an ancient phrase that we've taken over.
Exactly.
Yeah. But, he, points out that, fundamentally, man is a social animal, right? It is in our nature to be social. So what kind of society does a good man need? He needs the society of other good men, right? And he doesn't... Okay, so Aristotle talks about virtue as being, a stable disposition, right? The good man does not easily fall away from goodness. However, it's possible, right? And you need other people to, like I said, stimulate virtuous acts. Kind of the friendly competition that you see with some of the later Christian saints, right? That, like the early fathers, for example, that go out to the desert and try and one-up each other in humility. So, so the nature of the need there is it goes beyond the merely useful and, like he says, the pleasurable as well. The other shadow of friendship is when you just enjoy hanging out. If that's all there is to it, that's a friendship of pleasantness.
I would say that maybe there's two things there, right? Because I'm pulling from the politics and the argument, right? Is that sort of necessity brings about the forming of the city, but the city exists as sort of the opportunity for man to reach his excellence, and I think largely that comes from that the city provides, and therefore friendship in this case, an opportunity for justice, and justice in kind of a weird way, different than, say, like justice really can't exist within familial ties, right? It's like, of all my kids, they all have the same last name. Like,
right.
It's all kind of ours. The adjudication of, candy at Halloween or whatever. Like it all, however much candy we extorted from our neighbors, right? Like, it's ours.
We generally just ask. We don't have to extort.
No, I put up the meme, right? It's like, now kids, right? You got to tell them that's a nice lawn. I hope nothing bad happens to your lawn. Trick or treat, right? That's the cultural enculturation of extortion that trick or treating is. How else are you going to teach it, right? Next week we're going to talk about pyramid schemes and Social Security. But anyway, but the city, right, and justice and giving to another according to his due, to give to another according to his due means to know what is his due, and then to have sort of the will to give that, regardless of how it personally benefits me, right? And that really only happens in the city. And I think in a similar way, right, the good of friendship and the good that I will towards another as my friend is a it's an opportunity that I only have with another. I can't do that to myself, right? I can't self-sacrifice for myself. That's just called living, I'm pretty sure. But there's all this other sense of, right, that the friend is another self, right, and that the friend provides an opportunity for the individual to see sort of a mirror image of themselves, to basically how they become kind of, right, ordered towards goodness and seek it together. Well, that pursuit then allows for a foil, right, a reflection, in which I can see what flaws still remain, right, that I might not be able to see about myself, right? Back to my kids, I have a bunch of sons, so it's like every time we go to confession, it's like, okay, make sure you have your acts of contrition, and if you need any help, ask the brother next to you, because they're very keen on all your faults and all the things you've done wrong, and will eagerly tell you in case you don't have anything to confess, right? But that a friend, right, in a distinct relationship than, say, fraternal between brothers, offers us a lens into who we are, right? What things do I tolerate? Man, it really annoys me when my friend does this. I love him. I love him to death. But he really, oh wait, I do that same thing. Like, exactly. Ta-da. And so that's another thought I had about why they become necessary, even if you've attained kind of all the other non-social virtues in that sense.
Yeah. And, sorry, I've got a couple of tangents right in mind.
Oh, good.
One, this sort of kind of. Do you remember back when Facebook became a thing?
Facebook?
Yes, the Facebook.
The Facebook.
And friend became a verb. I friended him on Facebook. That drove me nuts.
Absolutely, there were pokes. There were pokes.
Oh yes.
In the early version of Facebook, there was like a web of your social connections, and you could see like a visualization, and then the sample pool got huge, and they just scrapped that sucker. Maybe it's alive in the metaverse. We'll see.
Well, unfortunately, I think the unfortunate knock-on effect. I mean, it's a obviously a good marketing ploy. You got friends on Facebook. I've got 100 friends, right? So many friends. But it's also kind of watered down the notion of friend and friendship. I do like the sort of the moralizing you can do by saying friend is a verb, right? It's an action, right? It's doing. I don't like the English of it. But
it is. I think it is clearly a participle or gerund with that nd ending. I'm fairly. A friend is someone you fry. Anyway, to be fried in oil by your association with that person. Yes.
Well, if you've had fried food, you know it's delicious, and you want what's best for your friend.
No, it's probably some Germanic philologist is probably really angry at that. But anyway, okay.
But so the watering down, right? And this kind of has only gotten worse as we've all become tied to social networks and apps and things. Aristotle's text brings us back to the need for real friendship, right? Not your 100, 200, 500 friends on Facebook. Do you share life with them? I mean, I always thought it was a little bit weird to share a bunch of pictures on Facebook, and it's like throw them out there for everybody to see. All those 500 people that call you a friend. It's, would you whip out the family album and sit down with them on the couch and say, look at this, you're a friend because you work together. Your boss at work is your friend on Facebook. It's weird.
But they didn't even like put in like badges in Facebook for like for like every guy on Facebook has to have the picture of him holding a fish, right? that is the whatever the meme or the trope about all the complaints on the dating apps, right? All the guys are just holding a fish. Like that's the only picture guys have. It's just they caught a fish and their friends took a picture. That's the only time guys take pictures of each other.
Yeah.
So
at least the picture proves that he has friends to take the picture.
Yes, yeah, because no one's putting down the fish and setting up the timer. It's like a proof of work kind of thing, proof of friend situation. Now there's going to be some guy that's like, no, I'm going to set the camera up ahead of time and I'm going to have gesture motions. So you say, right, sort of Aristotle he's not reclaiming, he's just claiming what real or genuine friendship is, right? And we just have diluted, right, that sense of friendship. But what is then to live life, experience life together? How did you phrase it?
Shared life.
Shared life. So okay, what do you mean by that? You use this term now.
I'm probably getting that from one of the translations I read, and it stuck with me. But so Aristotle says you can't be friends in actuality, with someone that you're not sharing your life experiences with. That he envisions actual living together in like a community type setting. It doesn't have to be quite that much, but he does use phrases like intimate living or intimate association. And why is that? Well, a friend is another self. You're willing the good of the other, that the highest good for the other. That's friendship. You can't do that if they're 1,000 miles away. You can be disposed to it. He actually addresses that, right? If you're separated by distance, you can have the disposition, the inclination, but it's not going to be actual, right? It's ready to act, but you can't do it.
Friends in potency, yes.
Yes. Or he actually says friendship is a virtue, so the virtue itself is in potency, waiting to be actualized the next time you see your friend that you thought was a cousin.
No, and I've definitely had that experience, and a lot of that is, the experience with hosting the Confederal Reserve. It's largely people I've come across in my there and back again Hobbit travels, and being able to kind of pick up in a lot of ways, kind of catch up and kind of when I catch up and pitch the vision of the interview of the kind of discussion. It's more a discussion than an interview. The idea is that there are these sort of questions that probably we tackled together or simultaneously or either as colleagues or as fellow students or in the course of life. And so that's the trick, right? In the course of life. So maybe in Aristotle's day, living in a more agrarian society, right? Everybody is kind of where they're at. There's no commuting, right? It's just,
right.
I'm going to go work on the farm today. Surprise, it's the farm. And then one day we go to town, right?
Yeah.
We're going to go vote, right?
Yeah.
They want us to vote. It's a democracy. It's a crazy idea we have. So all kind of, the shared place aspect is there. And I wonder if in our kind of modern context where people, have, sleeper communities or whatever, right? Where they commute into the city and they have like their city life, and then they have whatever goes on in Long Island, right? Home life, city life, or work life, wherever you're commuting in and coming out, and almost two different kind of worlds almost, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's TV shows that talk about there's Severance, right? It's the one where they like split the consciousness between work life and home life. Does that attack our ability to actually have friends? Because so much of our lives themselves are sort of compartmentalized and dissected that a shared life seems almost nearly impossible.
Actually, that compartmentalize was the word I was going to use. Yeah, that is a threat, a danger to actual friendship. It is an obstacle that has to be overcome. if you think about what you do at work, say you commute, say, a half an hour to get to work. Okay. What you do at work, the people that you know at work aren't going to see you outside of work unless there's a special event or an occasion. And then the people where you live don't see you at work. It's sort of like when you have the experience of someone saying, "Hey, I usually see you in a suit, never see you in street clothes," or something like that. There, you know that there's a disconnect there, and I don't think that person would be able, in the fullest sense, a friend, right? Mm-hmm. There has to be some bridging of the compartments to call it a friend. And why is that? Well, you don't know them, or they don't know you. You have to know the other person, and they have to know you, and that's how people don't want to use the word judgment, but you discern that they are a good person, right? They can discern that you are a good person, that this is a virtue-based relationship, rather than just utility or pleasantness. And again, you might be a virtuous person at work and a virtuous person at home, but they don't know that you're virtuous in both places. You might hope, have a good inclination, but somehow there should be an overcoming of the divide to call it a true friend. And Aristotle is realistic and addresses, well, it seems like you can't have many friends. No, you can't. In the fullest sense, you cannot have many friends because of this intimacy that is required. You can't do that. And in fact, he mentions in passing marital love, right? This is why you can only be married to one person, right? That's supposed to be an overflowing of friendship, is what he calls it. So just in passing, by the way, that's why you can't do polygamy. It's like, wow. he just mentions this in passing, but it's true, right? It's the nature of friendship itself that means that, yeah, polygamy shouldn't happen. I don't know how we could do that in today's culture efficiently, effectively. In some ways, the compartmentalization could work to our benefit because, say, in times past, when you weren't as mobile, your friends were more, or say like your work friends, you're sharing life more so with them, and so it becomes harder to be more selective about your friendships. I think about people like
two aspects there, right? Because you think of like your work friends. In a certain sense, work friends are suited for you because, presuming that you're doing work in which you have similar interests, like you ended up in the same place, right? Like,
right.
You know, like a firehouse with a bunch of firemen, like, you know, they like fighting fires and running into places where everyone is usually running out, right? And there's a certain culture that happens in the firehouse that allows them to be a team and allows them to sort of like cohabitate when they're on duty and not get on each other's nerves and to know what their roles are and kind of function in a shared life kind of experience. And then you have random cubicle jobs where it is just sort of you know, spin the wheel and see who's your cubicle, you know, neighbor or whatever, like kind of the detachment from sort of that common goal because here's a shared workspace kind of thing.
Right.
It kind of, I don't know, in one way, I think in the world of work and how it has become kind of rethought since the COVID lockdowns, that one thing I think that hasn't been pressed is sort of that intentionality of purpose in one's work, right? Mm-hmm. That hasn't been the revolution. We've had sort of like the comfort of work from home and various sort of accommodations to allow for, you know, the work-life balance, and there's pushback on that because, you know, at the end of the day we got to go do stuff and produce things and provide services. but in terms of I think it pushes against sort of this idea of sort of diversity in the workforce at a certain point for its own sake hinders the sort of similitude that friendship seeks out, right?
Yeah.
That we have to have a kind of the panoply of everybody on our workforce. Okay, but this is what we do. And some
Right.
people aren't necessarily happy doing that. So maybe we find people that are happy doing this job that we're doing. And at least there's a commonality there that can build as a team, as occupational or sort of the team health of a company versus its sort of bottom line health.
Right.
So sort of,
Imagine
we promised some significant tangents on this conversation.
Well, I was just thinking, how many companies actually say they all have mission and vision statements, right? It was a craze, and now it's become mandatory.
Yes.
How many actually bring that up in the interview process, right? For all sorts of levels of jobs. Are you expected to know when you're applying for the job? Do they expect you to know the mission and vision statement? No, most places don't. There's not that unity of focus. You're right. It is the bottom line instead. What can you provide, and how much can we get you for?
And in a certain, like a bare minimum, like that is that could be your go-to. Do you have any questions for us? Question for the interviewee, right? It's like,
yes.
Do you know your mission and vision statements by heart? And they either know it or they don't. And
Yep.
And like, oh, okay, I know that now. This is the Jason Fujikawa guide to awkward interviews, which is kind of a specialty of mine. So I've been on both sides of the desk. It's a lot of fun, particularly if you're willing to just like, okay, let's see if this works. Okay, it doesn't work. Kind of like friendship. Let's see if this works. I think we're going to go in another direction.
Yeah.
It's kind of how it comes down the pike.
Yeah.
So the other aspect on friendship is that turn he makes to the political structures.
Right.
Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it's interesting to think about how closely connected friendship and politics are for him, and just pause and let that sink in our modern political context. Wow, strange. And then there's also the other strange ideas. Monarchy is the best. Democracy is actually the worst.
It's the demos.
Yes.
It's the demos for a reason.
And, again, in our modern political context, think about that. It's jarring because we're so used to the rhetoric of democracy. But, just because we've lived with it for, a couple of 100 years, does that mean modern democracy is the best? I like it in general, but it helps us to see the flaws when we're confronted with an alternative vision. So at the same time, modern political context is very toxic, at least in the United States, and I'm assuming other places. Is there a possibility that what Aristotle talks about is a way forward, right? Many people get online, start spouting off like me right now, and complain, but what actually is the fix or a fix for what ails us? Well, how about friendship, right? Very few national problems are solved from above in an efficient and long-lasting way, right? It really needs to come from below. And I think like what you're doing with BetterPears, right, is one of those like a cells of a grassroots movement type of thing that when you get these pockets of friendship established, you can then build towards something better, an improvement of the political situation. It will naturally grow out of friendship.
But there's also the other possibility that while you can't solve problems at a top-down national level, you could certainly make a bunch of problems at the top level.
Yes.
And if you make so many problems, maybe they will counteract each other like sound waves. and they will solve their own problems by being such huge problems themselves, or cacophony.
Yeah.
The sound waves balance out, or pure chaos. Just yeah, and I think we've got the latter.
Yeah.
Right now. So I do obviously agree in that sense. Like, what is within my realm of affectivity? What can I change? And I can change my own relationships. Right. I can call up old friends and say, hey, I got this crazy idea for a YouTube channel, and I do this podcast, and kind of plant the seed in people's minds that there are bigger questions out there. There are unifying truths, and those need to be discussed. And those need to be discussed not just because it's not like I'm trying to convince you that there's universal aspects of friendship, or you're trying to convince me, but we're trying to kind of refine our understanding of friendship, right? That there is something kind of good external to us that we're seeking,
Right.
and we each get a perspective on it, but it's not the full view of it, and only together do we work on that, right?
Yeah.
And in so working on that, we actually become closer ourselves, because now I know what you think, or at least I have some idea of what you think.
Well, you continue to share life, and you learn more and more.
Yeah, and in my moments of clarity, maybe you understand a little bit of what I think, and it all kind of works out.
Yeah.
So that is interesting. And I was wondering though, when you brought up kind of monarchy and how Aristotle sees that as sort of the way to go, and not just because he's interviewing for a job under Philip II to teach Alexander the Great, right? But this something we see perhaps not in monarchies, but kind of through the totalitarian maybe tyrannies of say Russia and China presently, where you have sort of president or dictator for life status in Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Sorry for your Putin Xi Jinping fans out there. It's kind of weird, right? But also strangely effective. They're able to plan out decades ahead because they're not talking about a 4-year term, right? We just reelected Donald Trump, 4 years. That's all we got, right? Then we have to change some amendments to get him in for another term, but he's gonna be crazy old. And so then that cycle, that 4-year cycle, the election cycle is now the last 2 years of a presidency, and so even though Trump won't be running again, we're going to see both parties putting out candidates in 2 years' time. We start going through that, and sort of the bipolarity of the nation makes us ineffective as a nation relative to more stable, more authoritarian nations elsewhere. And I think, though, right, that some of that has to come from the extreme polarity of the two political parties presently, whereas back in the day, you just had, Federalists and anti-Federalists, right, or whatever Jefferson was by the time, right? He kind of took over, like, oh, we had the big shift in power to the Whigs or whatever, and it was, but there were still, these are still founding fathers. There's still people committed to the the virtues and the truths kind of expounded in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and they're working it, and they're trying to make sense of, okay, how do we run this government that we kind of patchwork together. And so even though the monarch or the chief executive changed every 4 or 8 years, there were some assassinations kind of tucked in their early years. But even though those kind of successions did occur, there was still sort of an even keel of the nation as a whole that we don't quite see now. It's either pedal to the metal one way, and then sort of that pendulum swing. We might see pedal to the metal in the other direction coming here in January.
Yeah.
And so I think it is difficult for us in the particular American moment that we're in right now to be able to assess the overall benefits of constitutional Republican, constitutional republic, or a direct democracy, or even representative democracy relative to a monarchy, because sort of the core identity of the American people sways in our two-party system.
Yes. And sorry, another a related point. What he talks about.
Don't be
kingship.
ashamed of your tangents. Don't be ashamed of your tangents.
I'm not ashamed. I proudly embrace my tangents. I just warn people
art.
that they're coming.
Oh, good.
But when he talks about monarchy, Aristotle says that monarchy is like a father, right? So it's like fatherhood. So the father is to the family as the king is to the nation. Why, he says? Because the king and the father seek out the good of the community, not their own good. And that's the key distinction between a king and a tyrant, seeking your own good or the good of the nation. But that analogy with fatherhood struck me because, what was it? Oh, it might have been 10 or 15 years ago. There was a political commentator who made some kind of connection there with how ruling should be, or how leading should be, maybe. And people kind of went crazy saying that's paternalism, that's patriarchalism, it's all the isms that are bad. And then, was it Chris Rock had that tearful little declaration that, when Obama was president, he's like the father of our country, right? So it gets brought up again and again, and it's just, how do you react to it? And what do you mean by it? Aristotle means somebody who seeks the good of the community, not their own good, right? Just like I told my wife, when we go on vacation, right, it's not a vacation for dad. Vacation is for the rest of the family. Why? Because the father is still looking out for the good of the family.
Protector.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not only looking at the labels, monarchy, democracy, etc., but looking at the reality that he's describing. We need to look at how we can bring that back into our political consciousness, right? That, in a democracy, we're responsible for the leaders that we elect, right? So at every level of society, we'll get better leaders if we demand better leaders. Well, what do we need to demand? How about demanding that people work for the good of the nation or the good of the community rather than their own good? We've had umpteen million scandals in the last 20 years, let's say, of American political life, of people obviously seeking their own good, holding high offices. Why don't we do something about that?
Well, I mean, and that is the big difference, right? Of sort of the state and the manufacture of the state in the the Hobbesian again. Hobbes made two appearances in the Leviathan, right? The beauty of the Leviathan, the Leviathan, is that the state never dies, whereas kings die. That's one of the qualities of a king. If you're a bad king or a tyrant, we can wait you out, or we can unwait you out through political assassination, through regicide, right? And so the king, though, himself cares for the nation as a father to his son, right, or father to his children, because the king knows he's going to die, and wants to provide the next heir, right, with the best kingdom to pass on down the line, right, for the good not only of his heir but for the people as a whole. An undying state, right, a political apparatus, a bureaucratic monstrosity, never dies.
Right.
It just keeps on going, and therefore doesn't need to think about successors. Doesn't need to think about the people it serves as well, and can just sort of self-serve, and maybe tax the people,
and leave the debt to future generations.
It's kind of, yeah, right. Yeah. So kind of the opposite, right? Leaving debt to future generations, like bringing money from the future into the now, into the present,
right?
And then spending it in the present and leaving the bill for the future, right? Is completely distinct from a monarchy, right? Who is trying to provide what is best, right? And the firm footing and the actual sort of wealth of the kingdom for the next generation.
Right.
So no, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing up kind of that paternal aspect and something we wrestle with, right? With this idea of patriotism, we're saying patriotism, good thing, right? Generally speaking, good thing.
Yes, right.
At the root, it's
Yes.
the paternalism.
It's a virtue.
It's the father.
Yeah.
Yes. But any final thoughts on Aristotle's ethics?
Lots of them, but I'll try and just keep it to one hobby horse thought that I have. Trot out every chance I get. Just a general view of the ethics, or general looking over the ethics, is notice the difference that Aristotle, or the different view that Aristotle has of virtue and goodness than we see portrayed, say, in modern stories and cinema, which, as you know, is a direct result of Kant and his critiques. And it really bugs me. I'll just take you to one thing: The Lord of the Rings. Read the book and then look at the movies. I understand why they make changes for movies, but look at the character of Aragorn. That is the one that
I thought you were going to say Faramir. I thought you were going to say Faramir.
No. I mean, I understand what they're doing for that, but Aragorn is the worst, right? He's
Okay.
the
So
whiny emo
explain-
kid.
Explain sort of Kantian ethics relative to Aristotelian sort of virtue ethics.
Really oversimplification. Kant says it's not virtuous unless it's difficult and unpleasant, right? Has to be hard, has to be a struggle, and you have to not like it. Aristotle says that if you have virtue, then the good action actually becomes pleasant, right? It is something you want to do. And not that it's always easy, right? There can be difficulties, but your inclination, your go-to, your knee-jerk reaction is to do the good thing, right? And if you read The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn has Aristotelian virtue. If you watch the movie, he has Kantian virtue, right? He's the emo, whiny kid who wants to have the sexy girlfriend without the responsibility of becoming king of Gondor and Arnor. And it bugs me to no end, right? Again, if you read the book, you know he's about 80 years old at the time of the War of the Ring, right?
He does wear it well.
Yeah,
in the book.
he does.
He wears the Dunedain.
And his whole purpose in life, since he was 20 years old and saw Arwen, was to become king of Arnor and Gondor so that he could be worthy of her, right? Now, thankfully, the movie does still have Arwen be his reason for becoming king. Yes, it's the modern Kantian virtue because it plays better on screen, right? It's more of a show to have a Kantian hero. It's harder to portray Aristotelian virtue unless you got to have the training montage, right? So
I don't want to. The
exactly.
narrator of who's kind of filling in everything. Tolkien himself, Tolkien's narrator,
right.
That you don't have. Thank goodness we don't have that in the movie.
Right. So that's, I guess, my final thought is look at Aristotle on virtue and compare it to what we see in modern storytelling. See the difference and see which one is actually more compelling.
Very good. No, and I do think sort of the influence of Kant. And again, Immanuel Kant, if our listeners or viewers aren't familiar, he's writing roughly around the American Revolution. I think his groundwork for Meditation on Morals is 1776. That's how I associate the dates. Mm-hmm. And his popularity sort of picks up into the 19th century and then kind of hovers. It's sort of, de Tocqueville says we're sort of Cartesians who've never read Descartes. Yep. But there's a lot of Kant that's also stewing there. Mm-hmm. Not by the time that maybe de Tocqueville was observing Americans, but shortly thereafter, his influence on ethics and on kind of a morality that is seeking to be based on sort of reason alone, mm-hmm. is troubling. Yes. not overtly troubling, but just sort of in a more sort of slow burn trouble that comes out when people like yourself are watching Lord of the Rings and engaging with other people in life as well in terms of understanding what moves them, what is causing their sort of moral reaction to things. So very good, Matthew. Just want to thank you again for appearing here today on the Confederal Reserve. To our audience, from all of us here at the Confederal Reserve and the BetterPears Cultural Empire, thank you for watching. See you next time on the Confederal Reserve. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can click here to watch a recent interview of the Confederal Reserve, or over here to view the playlist of the BetterPears podcast.